A 32-year-old travel influencer with over 1 million followers lies dead in a luxury Las Vegas hotel suite, and the white powder his group thought was cocaine turns out to be something far more deadly. Fentanyl-Laced had traveled to over 40 countries, built a digital empire, and was living the life thousands dreamed of. But on November 4th, 2025, that dream ends in room after room of the Wynn Las Vegas when fentanyl stops his heart. 2 women wake up next to his body with no memory of how the night spiraled into tragedy, and investigators face a haunting question. Who sold them death on a casino floor at 4 a.m, and can that person ever be found? Subscribe to Crazy Crime Lures to find out. The call comes in just after 5 a.m. on November 4th, and Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Dispatch sends units to the Wynn Las Vegas, one of the most exclusive hotels on the Strip. 2 women are frantic, their voices shaking as they tell the dispatcher that their friend isn't breathing and they can't find a pulse. And paramedics are already racing toward the Golden Tower, where high rollers and celebrities stay in suites that cost thousands per night. When first responders arrive at the room, they find Fentanyl-Laced unresponsive on the bed, his skin already showing signs that precious minutes have passed since his heart stopped beating. The 2 women in the room are Shivani Parihar, Sud's fiancée, and another female companion, and both are visibly shaken but cooperative as paramedics immediately begin CPR and pull out their Narcan kits. Narcan, the opioid overdose reversal drug, gets administered once, then twice, then 3 times, then 4, then 5 doses pumped into Sud's system as paramedics work desperately to bring him back. His chest compresses under their hands, the rhythm mechanical and urgent, but there's no response, no gasp of air, no flutter of life returning to his body. The room itself tells a story that investigators will soon piece together. There's a small amount of white powder residue on surfaces, a rolled-up $100 bill sitting nearby, and the remnants of what looked like a party that turned into a nightmare. At 7:23 in the morning, after every revival attempt has failed, paramedics make the call that no one wants to make, and Fentanyl-Laced is pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives arrive and immediately begin separating the 2 women for individual interviews. And what they hear is a timeline that started just hours earlier in the glittering chaos of the casino floor. Shivani and the other woman tell investigators that around 4 a.m, they met a man downstairs in the Wynn Casino, someone they didn't know but who approached them in the way that strangers do in Las Vegas at 4 a.m. when inhibitions are low and the night feels endless. This man told them he had cocaine for sale, and in that moment, with the Vegas lights still blazing and the promise of continuing their night, they made a purchase. The women described going back upstairs to their suite with Fentanyl, opening the small baggie of white powder they just bought, and using the rolled-up $100 bill to snort what they believed was pure cocaine. They tell detectives they each took some, Fentanyl took some, and then exhaustion hit them all at once, so they went to sleep thinking they'd wake up with nothing worse than a hangover. But when Shivani and her companion wake up around 5 a.m, something is terribly wrong, and Fentanyl isn't moving, isn't breathing, isn't responding to their increasingly desperate attempts to shake him awake. The women's statements are consistent on the basic timeline, but investigators immediately recognize the glaring problem. Neither woman can provide a detailed description of the man who sold them the drugs. They don't have his name, they don't have his contact information, and in a casino filled with hundreds of people and dozens of surveillance cameras, finding one stranger from hours ago becomes a monumental challenge. Detectives process the hotel room with meticulous care, photographing every surface, collecting the residual powder, bagging the $100 bill, and documenting the scene exactly as they found it, and the investigation shifts from a tragic overdose to something more complex the moment they start asking the harder questions. How does a travel influencer with everything to lose end up buying drugs from a stranger on a casino floor. What made that particular encounter happen at that particular time? And most importantly, who was the man who sold them what he claimed was cocaine, but what investigators are now almost certain was something far more dangerous? The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's narcotics unit gets brought in because this isn't just an accidental death anymore. This is potentially distribution of a controlled substance, resulting in death. And if they can identify the seller, he could face serious felony charges. Surveillance footage from the casino becomes the immediate focus, and investigators begin the painstaking process of reviewing hours of video from multiple camera angles, trying to spot Shivani, her companion, and Anunai interacting with anyone suspicious around 4 in the morning. The casino floor at that hour is still busy enough that dozens of people move through frame, some gambling, some drinking, some wandering aimlessly, and picking out one specific interaction from that crowd requires frame-by-frame analysis and pattern recognition. The toxicology results come back from the Clark County Coroner's Office, and the findings are as devastating as investigators feared. Anunai Sood died from combined fentanyl and ethanol toxicity, meaning the white powder he snorted wasn't cocaine at all, but fentanyl, a synthetic opioid so potent that an amount smaller than a few grains of salt can kill an adult human. Fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. And it's become the leading cause of overdose deaths in America because drug dealers cut other substances with it to increase potency and profit margins without telling buyers what they're actually getting. The coroner rules Sood's death an accident because there's no evidence he intended to take fentanyl. He thought he was buying and using cocaine. But the presence of alcohol in his system amplified the fentanyl's effects and made the overdose even more lethal. This toxicology report transforms the investigation because now detectives know they're looking for someone who sold fentanyl disguised as cocaine, and whether that seller knew what he was peddling or was himself deceived by his supplier, he put a deadly substance into Anunai's hands. Investigators also test the 2 women for drugs in their systems, and both show evidence of fentanyl exposure, but somehow they survived the doses they took while Anunai did not. Perhaps because they took less, perhaps because their body chemistry processed it differently, or perhaps because they woke up before the drug could fully shut down their respiratory systems. Surveillance footage review continues for days, and investigators comb through casino camera angles looking for the moment of transaction. But the Wynn's casino floor is vast and crowded even in early morning hours, and cameras don't cover every single spot with perfect clarity. Detectives do identify footage of Anunai and the 2 women moving through the casino around the 4 a.m. time frame, and they can see the group stopping and talking to various people. But isolating the specific individual who sold them drugs proves nearly impossible without clearer descriptions from the witnesses. The women are brought back in for follow-up interviews, and detectives push them to remember anything distinctive about the man. His height, his build, what he was wearing, any distinguishing features, any accent or speech pattern, anything that could help narrow down hundreds of people to one person. The women try, but their memories are hazy from the alcohol they'd consumed earlier in the evening and from the trauma of waking up to find Anunai dead beside them. And what they recall is frustratingly vague. A man, probably in his 30s or 40s, average height, nothing particularly memorable about his appearance. In a city where thousands of men fit that description and where people come and go every single day, this lack of detail becomes a massive obstacle. Investigators also check hotel records to see if anyone matching a general description checked in or out around that time. They review parking garage footage to see if they can track vehicles, and they canvass casino staff to ask if anyone remembers seeing suspicious drug transactions. But none of these efforts produces a solid lead. The Clark County District Attorney's Office gets briefed on the case, and prosecutors explain that even if investigators could identify the seller, building a prosecutable case would require proving he knowingly distributed fentanyl or knowingly distributed a substance he falsely represented as cocaine. And without the seller in custody, without his admission, and without being able to test the exact batch of drugs he sold, those elements become difficult to establish beyond reasonable doubt. The legal framework exists to charge drug dealers when their products kill someone. Nevada law allows for murder charges in cases where a dealer knowingly provides fentanyl that results in death, but the law requires proof of intent and knowledge that prosecutors simply don't have yet. So the investigation remains open and active, with detectives continuing to chase down tips and leads. But as days turn into weeks, the case grows colder, and the chances of identifying the casino floor dealer diminish. Anunai Sood's sudden death sends shockwaves through the travel influencer community and across social media platforms, where he'd built his following over years of content creation. He wasn't just a casual poster. He was a professionally recognized digital creator who'd been named to Forbes India's Top 100 Digital Stars list 3 years in a row from 2022 through 2024, an achievement that put him among India's most successful online personalities. His Instagram account had over 1.5 million followers, and his YouTube channel had nearly 400,000 subscribers, and his content focused on luxury travel, exotic destinations, and the kind of aspirational lifestyle that made viewers dream of boarding planes to places they'd never been. Anunai had traveled to more than 40 countries, partnering with tourism boards and major brands who paid him to showcase their destinations and products, and he'd turned his passion for exploration into a lucrative career. But behind the perfectly curated Instagram posts and the YouTube vlogs showing sunsets over foreign cities, Anunai was a person with a fiancé he loved, with family back in India who followed his adventures from afar, and with friends who knew him as more than just his online persona. He was 32 years old, based in Dubai, and living the kind of life that seemed unstoppable. So when news of his death breaks, his followers struggled to reconcile the vibrant person they saw on their screens just days earlier with the reality that he's gone. His last social media posts show him at the Las Vegas Concours, an ultra-exclusive automotive event held at the Wynn from October 30th through November 2nd, where rare and exotic cars worth millions of dollars are displayed for collectors and enthusiasts. The event attracts wealthy attendees from around the world, and Anunai had been documenting the experience with his usual high-quality photography and engaging captions, giving his followers a glimpse into a world most would never access. His Instagram stories from those days show gleaming Ferraris and Lamborghinis, champagne receptions, and the kind of networking opportunities that come with elite automotive gatherings. And there's no hint in any of his content that within 48 hours he'd be dead in his hotel room. The tragedy of it cuts deeper because everything in Anunai's public presence suggested someone at the peak of his career, someone with brand deals and travel opportunities lined up for months ahead, someone who'd built something real and valuable in the competitive world of digital influence. His fiancée, Shivani, who was with him that night and who had to wake up to the horror of finding him unresponsive, now faces not only grief, but also the trauma of having participated in the drug use that killed him. And while she's not facing criminal charges, the psychological weight of that night will follow her forever. The Las Vegas trip was supposed to be a celebration, a chance to attend a prestigious event and create content that would engage his audience and strengthen his brand partnerships. But instead, it becomes the setting for a cautionary tale about the deadly dangers lurking in recreational drug use. Anunai's family releases a statement through representatives asking for privacy as they grieve, and they make clear that while Anunai made a fatal mistake that night, he was a beloved son and brother who brought joy to millions through his content. His followers flood his Instagram and YouTube with memorial comments, sharing how his videos inspired them to travel, to explore, to see the world differently, and the outpouring of grief from people who never met him in person demonstrates the genuine connection he'd built through his digital presence. Travel bloggers and fellow influencers post tributes, many of them reflecting on the pressures and temptations that come with their lifestyle. Constant travel, late nights, access to parties and substances, and the thin line between living adventurously and making choices that can't be undone. The Wynn Las Vegas, meanwhile, finds itself dealing with the fallout of a high-profile death on its property, though hotel representatives declined to comment publicly beyond expressing condolences and confirming they're cooperating fully with the investigation. The hotel's security footage has been turned over to police. Staff members have been interviewed about what they may have observed. And the casino's surveillance systems that monitor every square foot of gaming floor are being used to try to identify the drug dealer who walked among their guests. But the Wynn, like every major Las Vegas casino, deals with thousands of guests daily, and while security is extensive, it's impossible to prevent every illicit transaction or to know when someone approaching a guest is offering drugs rather than just making conversation. The incident highlights a broader issue in Las Vegas, the city's reputation as a place where what happens here stays here, creates an environment where people feel emboldened to make risky choices they might not make elsewhere. And the easy availability of drugs from strangers who operate in the shadows of casinos and nightclubs means that danger is never far from the party. As investigators continue working the case, they face the reality that the fentanyl crisis has made these kinds of deaths increasingly common. And Las Vegas, with its constant influx of tourists looking to indulge, has become a hotspot for overdose fatalities. The drug that killed Anunai is the same drug that's been found in counterfeit pills disguised as Xanax or Percocet, the same drug that's been mixed into heroin and methamphetamine, and the same drug that dealers now cut into cocaine to increase its effects without telling buyers what they're actually getting. The problem is that fentanyl's potency means there's almost no margin for error. A tiny miscalculation in how much someone takes can mean the difference between a high and death. And because it's often mixed unevenly into other substances, one line of powder might contain a lethal dose, while another contains almost none. This Russian roulette quality of street drugs in the fentanyl era means that even experienced drug users who think they know what they're doing can die from a single use, and Anunai's death fits this pattern perfectly. Detectives have exhausted their most promising leads, and without a clear suspect or additional witnesses coming forward, the case reaches a frustrating standstill where investigators know what happened but can't identify who made it happen. The man who sold fentanyl to Anunai and his companions on that casino floor remains unidentified, and he could be anywhere by now, still in Las Vegas selling to other unsuspecting buyers, moved on to another city, or perhaps completely unaware that his product killed someone. Some dealers who sell fentanyl-laced drugs don't even know what they're selling because they themselves buy from suppliers who don't disclose the full contents, creating a chain of ignorance that makes accountability nearly impossible to establish. Other dealers know exactly what they're peddling and simply don't care because fentanyl is cheaper and more profitable than pure cocaine, and the risk of killing a customer is just a cost of doing business. Without the seller in custody, investigators can't determine which category this particular dealer falls into, and that ambiguity hampers their ability to pursue charges, even if they could make an identification. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department issues public appeals asking anyone who might have information about drug sales at the Wynn on the night of November 3rd into November 4th to come forward, and they set up a tip line specifically for this case. But tips are scarce, and those that do come in lead nowhere concrete. The department's narcotics division continues to monitor known drug dealers and informants in the area, hoping that someone in the criminal network might have heard something or might know who was working the casino floors that night. But the underground drug trade operates on silence and loyalty born from mutual criminality, so information doesn't flow freely to police. Investigators also coordinate with the DEA because fentanyl trafficking is a federal concern, and if they can identify a supplier network rather than just an individual street dealer, federal prosecutors might be able to build a larger case that addresses the source of the deadly drugs flooding Las Vegas. The Clark County Coroner's Office officially closes Anu-Nai-Sood's case as an accidental death caused by fentanyl and ethanol toxicity, and that ruling means there's no suspicion of murder or foul play beyond the criminal act of drug distribution. His body is released to his family, and arrangements are made to transport him back to India, where funeral services will be held. And thousands of miles from the Las Vegas hotel room where he died, his family and friends gather to mourn a life cut short by a choice that seemed harmless in the moment, but carried consequences no one anticipated. The travel influencer who'd shown the world so many beautiful places takes his final journey home in a casket, and the cruel irony isn't lost on anyone who followed his adventures. As of today, no arrests have been made in connection with Anu-Nai-Sood's death, and the investigation remains technically open, though active leads have dried up. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department maintains that if new information emerges, they'll pursue it aggressively. But without witness cooperation, improving or surveillance footage, revealing what it hasn't already shown, the likelihood of identifying and prosecuting the drug dealer diminishes with each passing day. The case represents a broader challenge facing law enforcement across America. How do you hold drug dealers accountable when their customers die, especially when the transactions happen in crowded public spaces between strangers who leave no paper trail? Traditional investigative techniques work when there are phone records, financial transactions, or ongoing relationships between dealer and buyer. But when someone sells drugs in a casino to tourists who paid cash and whose only connection was a brief conversation, the evidence needed to build a case simply doesn't exist. Shivani Parihar and the other woman who survived that night have not spoken publicly about what happened, and they're not required to since they're considered witnesses rather than suspects. The trauma they carry is immense. They made the same choice Anu-Nai did, consumed the same substance, and only by chance or biological variation did they wake up while he didn't. And that survivor's guilt combined with the horror of the discovery will shape the rest of their lives. Neither woman faces charges because Nevada law doesn't criminalize drug possession in amounts consistent with personal use in the same way it criminalizes distribution. And prosecutors have determined there's no evidence either woman knew they were buying fentanyl or intended to harm Anu-Nai. The travel and influencer community has responded to Anu-Nai's death with a mixture of grief and calls for greater awareness about the fentanyl crisis, and several prominent content creators have used their platforms to warn followers about the dangers of recreational drug use in an era when any substance bought on the street could be contaminated. Some influencers share stories of their own close calls or friends who've died from overdoses, hoping that transparency about the risks might save lives, while others argue that the lifestyle pressures of constant content creation and maintaining a perfect online image can drive people towards substances that promise escape or enhancement. The conversation is uncomfortable because it forces an industry built on aspiration and beauty to confront the darker realities of the lifestyle it sells. But Anu-Nai's death makes that conversation unavoidable. In Las Vegas, the Wynn continues operating as it always has, hosting guests who come to gamble and party and live out their Vegas fantasies. And the hotel room where Anu-Nai died has likely been cleaned and rented to new guests who have no idea the tragedy that occurred there weeks earlier. The casino floor where the fatal drug transaction took place still buzzes with activity at 4 a.m, still fills with people making choices they might not make back home, and still attracts dealers who know that tourists with money are easy targets. The cycle continues because Las Vegas's entire economy is built on excess and indulgence. And while most visitors leave with nothing worse than lighter wallets and hangovers, some leave in body bags. What remains most haunting about this case is how preventable it was, and yet how difficult prevention seems in practice. If Anunai and his companions hadn't approached the dealer, if they'd said no to the offer, if they'd tested the substance before using it with fentanyl test strips that are now widely available, if they'd used smaller amounts, if someone had stayed awake to monitor the others, if they'd had Narcan on hand, any of these choices might have changed the outcome. But none of them happened. The dealer who sold them what he claimed was cocaine will likely never face justice unless someone comes forward with information that investigators don't currently have. And even if he is eventually identified, prosecutors would have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he knew or should have known the substance was fentanyl and that selling it directly caused Anunai's death. Those are high legal bars to clear, and without a confession or physical evidence tying a specific person to the transaction, the case may remain forever unsolved. The Fentanyl-Laced case asks us to confront uncomfortable truths about drug policy, personal responsibility, and the fentanyl epidemic that's killing tens of thousands of Americans every year. Should recreational drug users bear the full weight of responsibility when they die from substances that were misrepresented to them? Should dealers who sell fentanyl-laced products face murder charges even if they didn't intend to kill anyone? How do we balance personal freedom with public health when the consequences of one bad decision can be death? These questions don't have easy answers, and Anunai's family doesn't get the comfort of knowing that his death will lead to systemic change or that the person responsible will be held accountable. What we're left with is a 32-year-old influencer who traveled the world, built a following of over 1 million people, and died alone in a Las Vegas hotel room because the cocaine he thought he was buying was actually fentanyl. We're left with 2 women who survived but will carry the weight of that night forever. We're left with a family in India mourning a son who should still be posting travel photos and living his dreams. And we're left with an unidentified drug dealer who walked away from the Wynn Casino that morning with cash in his pocket and a death on his hands. Whether he knows it or not, the investigation continues, but realistically, unless someone with direct knowledge comes forward, Anunai-Laced's death will join the thousands of other fentanyl fatalities where the person responsible is never identified and never charged. The case file remains open at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. The toxicology report sits in the Clark County Coroner's records, and somewhere in the Wynn surveillance archives, there's footage of the moment when a stranger approached Anunai and his companions and offered them something that would kill one of them within hours. What do you think could be done to prevent tragedies like this? Should casinos bear any responsibility for drug transactions that happen on their property? Let us know in the comments below. For now, Anunai-Laced is remembered through his Instagram posts and YouTube videos, digital footprints of a life lived fully until it ended suddenly, and his followers scroll through images of places he'll never visit again and adventures he'll never have. The Las Vegas Strip continues glittering outside the Wynn's windows, promising excitement and escape to the next wave of tourists. And somewhere in that crowd, dealers continue operating, selling substances that might be exactly what they claim or might be death disguised as recreation. And the question that haunts everyone who knew Anunai or followed his journey is the simplest and most painful one of all. How does someone with everything to live for die over something so senseless? The case remains open, the search for answers continues, and justice for Anunai-Laced remains frustratingly out of reach.